Little girl was left beside her dead mother on the trail until a silent cowboy took her in and never spoke of his own loss again. The wind whipped through the canyon like 1,000 whispers. Dust rose in slow spirals off the cracked earth, and the sky was the color of dried blood. Will Carver rode slow through the gulch, his boots caked in red mud, reins loose in one hand, the other resting on the stock of his Winchester. He was not looking for anything. He never was. That was the strange thing about fate. It found you anyway. He saw her near the bend in the rocks, just beyond the broken mesquite. A small form curled beside a larger one, stiff and still. At first, he thought it was an animal, a wild dog maybe. But then the shape moved. Not much, just a twitch of the arm. Will dismounted, boots crunching dry shale. As he approached, the scene came into focus. A woman lay cold on the ground, face sunken, lips gray, her arms stretched protectively around a girl no older than 14. The child was barely breathing, her skin pale, lips cracked, eyes sunken deep into her face. But her gaze was open, still alive. He crouched. The girl did not flinch. "Hey," he said softly. She blinked, like it hurt. "Can you move?" She opened her mouth. No sound came. She tried again, this time a whisper, brittle as wind. "She won't wake up." Will looked at the woman, dead maybe 2 days. Fever had taken her. Her hands were covered in dried sweat, her hair stuck to her temple like old seaweed. Will exhaled slowly. "What's your name?" he asked. The girl's voice came again, barely audible. "Elsie?" He stood and paced, hands on hips. He could leave her, ride into town, tell the sheriff, let someone else take her. She was not his problem. But then he looked down again. Elsie did not cry, did not plead, just stared at him with eyes too old for her age. And suddenly he was not in the canyon anymore. He was on the dirt floor of his own childhood home, watching his sister Clara die from pox, her body too small for the blanket he had tried to cover her with. He remembered his mother's voice fading into nothing, his father's boots walking away and never coming back. Will took a breath, then another. He knelt beside the mother and began to dig. It took him nearly an hour, using nothing but a small folding shovel from his saddlebag. He wrapped the body in the mother's shawl, placed it into the earth, and covered it with as much dignity as time and dust allowed. He crossed himself, then turned to the girl. "Come on." She did not move. "I ain't asking again." He scooped her up. She weighed nothing, a bag of bones and breath. She held something clutched in her hand, a rag doll with no face left. Her head fell against his shoulder, and for the first time she closed her eyes. Will lifted her onto his horse, mounted behind her, and rode slow and steady toward his camp. The canyon stretched wide around them. The silence of the desert was heavy, but not empty. They rode for hours. The sun dipped low. Shadows crawled up rock walls like old ghosts. Will kept one hand on the reins, the other around the girl's waist. She did not speak, but when he glanced down, her hand had found his coat and held on. By the time they reached camp, a small lean-to near a creek bend, she was asleep. Will laid her on a bedroll, stoked the fire, and covered her with his spare blanket. He sat beside her, chewing jerky in the dark, staring at the flames. He could not say why he had done it, why he had not left her for someone else. But somewhere deep, buried under the calluses and silence, something had shifted. When the fire cracked loud, she stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. Will looked at her, and this time she did not look away. "You got a name," he said. "You got breath, and now—" He paused. The words came slowly, like rocks dragged from water. "From now on, you got me." The wind had a different sound when winter came. It no longer whistled. It groaned, low and endless, like something ancient crawling across the land. Snow did not fall fast in these parts. It crept, flake by flake, turning the canyon into a graveyard of silence. Will Carver did not mind the cold, but this year it was not just his fingers he had to worry about. He'd built her a small shack next to his own cabin, out of scavenged timber and canvas scraps. It was not much. 4 walls, a cot, and a potbelly stove he never managed to get working, but it stood against the wind, and that was something. He watched her the first night she lay inside it, curled tight under 3 layers of blankets, eyes wide open, unblinking. She did not ask questions. She never had. Elsie was like a ghost during the day, quiet, thin, moving with strange grace despite the worn boots that flopped at her heels. She would sit near the edge of the pen where the calves were kept, arms folded around her knees, just watching Will mend fences, watching him pour feed, watching the way he stirred coffee or cut rope. She never asked for anything. Will began to find things moved. His coffee cup, washed and left beside the basin. The barn tools hung straighter, firewood stacked higher. No word of thanks, no call for attention. Just done. At night, he would hear the creak of her shack door, the sound of pencil scratching faintly through the walls. She had found a worn, leather-bound notebook in a storage crate, and though Will never saw her write, he knew that was how she spent her nights, letting whatever storm she kept behind her silence pour out onto paper. One evening, the wind rose angry. The cattle lowed. Will had to lash the shutters with rope. Snow pelted the roof in diagonal sheets, and the stove coughed smoke instead of heat. He had just poured himself a tin cup of stew when he heard the sound, soft but sharp, a whimper, then a cough. He was up before the cup hit the table. He burst into her shack and found her twisted under the blankets, skin burning hot. Her breath came in ragged pulls, and sweat soaked her hair to her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open, then shut again. Will did not think. He lifted her and carried her into his own cabin, placing her on his cot. He wrapped her in fresh wool, boiled water, soaked rags, and pressed them gently to her forehead. He whispered curses at the storm, the land, the silence that had turned him into someone who forgot how to care. She moaned once in her sleep, just one word. Will sat beside her, elbows on knees, holding a cool cloth to her brow. The fire cracked. Wind rattled the glass. "If you were Clara," he muttered, "you'd be about her age now." He looked at her, truly looked, at the sharp lines of her face, the cheekbones grown too fast, the long lashes matted from fever. His sister had never made it to this age. 13 and gone. Elsie had outlived her. But sometimes, in the quiet moments, Will saw her ghost in this girl's eyes. He stayed awake all night. By dawn, the fever broke. Her skin cooled, her breathing steadied. She did not wake, but she turned toward him in sleep, as if sensing the shape of care she had never known. Will stood slowly. He went outside and shoveled a path to the barn, fists tight around the handle. He did not cry. He never did, but something loosened in him. That night, when she finally opened her eyes, she found a folded blanket at her feet and a tin cup of water on the stool beside her. Will was gone, but a note sat under the cup, written in rough block letters. "No more sleeping cold. You stay here now. W." She stared at the note for a long time. Then, silently, she opened her journal and wrote. The time her 18th birthday passed, quietly, without cake, candles, or any real marker at all, Elsie had changed. Not all at once. It began with the way she moved, less like a child, more like someone cautious of the space she took up, her steps slower, more aware. Then came the mornings. She began rising earlier than Will, lighting the fire before dawn, setting out the skillet, cutting apples with practiced care. When Will stumbled out with his usual groan, coffee already waited, steaming on the table beside a biscuit folded in waxed cloth. "You don't need to do that," he muttered one morning. Elsie just shrugged. "I like to." She had also taken to sewing. She used scraps from his worn shirts, trying to copy the stitches she had once seen on her mother's dress hem. The first one she made was crooked, collar too wide, but the second, that one Will wore. He did not say anything when he found it folded on his cot, buttons made from polished shell, the cuffs carefully hemmed to his size. But the next morning he wore it while mending the corral fence. Elsie watched from the doorway, her cheeks pinked. She had changed, more than he had expected. Her frame had lengthened, no longer all elbows and shadow. Her face, though still quiet, held something deeper now. Her eyes no longer darted from him, they lingered, especially when he worked shirtless in the sun, sweat gleaming across his chest, the muscles in his shoulders tensing with each pull of rope. She would pretend to be looking elsewhere, but her gaze always circled back. Will noticed, of course he did, and he kept his distance. He added an extra chore between them whenever possible. If she came to the barn, he'd move out to the pasture. If she lingered too long near the fire, he'd find something to mend outside. It was not that he feared her, it was that he feared what others might think, what she might start to feel. She was a child still, and he was not. Then came the day he was thrown. It was a hot afternoon, dust hanging in the air like smoke. Will had been trying to break a young steer that had gone half mad with the heat. One wrong twist of the rope and the beast lunged sideways, horn catching his side, sending him sprawling into the dirt. He groaned once, rolled onto his back, then went still. Elsie saw it all. She ran to him, heart pounding so hard it made her ears ring. His side bled through his shirt, and there was a gash along his brow. His eyes were closed. "Will," she whispered, "please." She dragged him to the shade, trembling as she cleaned the wound with water from her flask. His chest rose, shallow but steady. Her hands hovered, unsure, then settled, gently, brushing the hair back from his face, wiping the blood away. She smoothed his brow, pressed her palm against his. He stirred. His eyes cracked open, dazed, breath catching. Then he looked up at her. His hand reached out, gripping hers, tight. Her heart thudded. She held his gaze. Breath caught in her throat. Then, just as suddenly, he pulled his hand back, rolled to the side with a wince, sat up. "Thank you," he said, voice low. Elsie nodded. "You were bleeding." "I'm fine." He stood. She stepped back. Silence filled the air between them, thick and fragile. Neither spoke again that evening. But something had shifted, and neither of them could pretend not to feel it. At 18th, Elsie no longer wondered about her feelings. She knew. It was not curiosity or confusion, not the hero worship of a girl saved from ruin. It was not gratitude. It was something older than words, something that curled in her bones like firelight. It was the way she noticed the dust on his boots before she noticed the sun, the way his voice steadied her more than any prayer, the way his quiet became her home. It was not just admiration or the kind of warmth one feels for a savior. It was deeper, like roots threading through her ribs, curling into her breath, tangling with her every thought. It was the way her heart fluttered every time Will brushed past her without meaning to, the way her stomach sank when he walked too far from the cabin and did not come back before dark. It was the way she leaned closer to the fire on cold nights, pretending to warm her hands, when really she was listening for the creak of his boots outside, the familiar rhythm of his walk returning to her. And it was the way she wrote. In the old journal, once her mother's, now hers, she poured everything she could not say aloud. Her handwriting was small, almost shy, as if afraid the page might judge her. But her words were bold. "He is not just the man who saved me. He is the only dream I have ever dared to hold. He does not see me, not truly. Or maybe he sees too well, and that is why he keeps stepping back. But I see him, the way he holds grief behind his eyes like a rifle he never puts down, the way he never forgets how I take my tea, the way he says my name like it means something." She wrote with trembling fingers by the light of a stubby candle, her knees curled under her, hiding the book beneath the straw of her cot when done. The cover had worn soft. The pages curled at the edges from her touch. A single pressed flower, faded pink, marked the place where her heart had begun to speak louder than her fear. Will had not changed much on the surface. He still called her kid sometimes, still tousled her hair when she did something clever, still whistled off-key in the mornings and grumbled about mending fences. But lately, he looked away more quickly when she caught his gaze. His smiles were slower to rise. His silences lingered. That afternoon the wind was dry, the sun sharp over the ridgeline. Elsie had gone to gather firewood in the lower groves, her hair braided back, humming something soft to herself. Will stayed behind to clean the lean-to, meaning only to sweep out dust and shake out her bedding. He lifted the straw mattress and paused when something tumbled out. A small leather-bound book. A pressed flower slipped from the pages. He knew he should not open it, but his hands moved before his judgment could stop them. The handwriting was neat, slanted, familiar. His name appeared, once, then again. Phrases he could not unread, feelings he had suspected, feared, buried. If I kissed him, would he turn away? If I ran, would he come after me? Will's throat tightened. He turned another page, then another, each one a mirror, each one a weight. He shut the book, hard. Anger surged, not at her but at himself. He had known she was growing into something beautiful, something bright, something that pulled at him in quiet moments when the fire burned low. He had known and tried to bury it beneath duty, beneath memory, beneath guilt. He had raised walls, but now they were cracking. When Elsie returned, arms full of branches, she saw him before he spoke. Sitting stiffly by the fire, the journal beside him, his jaw clenched. The wind had shifted, and so had something else. "Where were you keeping this?" he asked, voice low. She froze. Her eyes dropped to the journal, then to his face. Under the mattress," she whispered. "You meant every word?" She did not speak. Her throat closed. Her heart pounded. Will's voice broke. "Elsie." But she had already crossed the space, snatched the journal from the ground, clutching it to her chest like a wound. "Do not read my thoughts like a thief," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "They were not for you to see." "It was not, I did not mean," he started, but stopped. His hands were fists at his sides. She backed away. And then, without warning, she turned and ran. Out the door. Into the wind. Barefoot, her braid unraveling behind her. Journal clutched in one hand, a small oil lamp in the other. The wind howled across the plain and she disappeared into it like smoke. Will stood, stunned. Then the fear hit. He grabbed his coat, his rifle, and ran into the dark after her, calling her name again and again, into the silence, into the night, into the storm of what he had never dared to feel, until now. The storm rolled in like a living thing, thick with rage and memory. Rain sliced sideways, cutting across the ridgeline in blinding sheets. Thunder cracked low and hard against the canyon walls, as if the earth itself was growling. Will's boots sank in the wet dirt with every step, soaked through to the bone. But he did not stop, could not. His voice cut through the storm, ragged and desperate. "Elsie." No answer. Only the wind, howling louder each time, as if mocking him. Trees groaned under the weight of the wind. Water rushed louder in the nearby creek, rising fast, brown and angry. He had been careless. Not with her safety, never with her heart, but with his own restraint. He had buried what he felt beneath layers of duty, guilt, the echo of what people would say if they knew. That silence had built a wall, and when she finally touched it, he shut down, pushed her away, let her run. And now she was gone. A sharp branch slapped his face, drawing blood, but he did not flinch. His chest burned. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the fear that it was too late, that he had let something beautiful break because he was too afraid to hold it. Then came the voice, his mother's voice, rising from somewhere deeper than memory, almost like a curse. "Don't let your sister die alone, like I let you." It was what she had said on her deathbed, words twisted by fever, by regret, but they came now with the full weight of warning. "No," he muttered, "not again." He shoved through the brush. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost all shape beneath the storm. His body ached, soaked and raw. Then, as dawn teased the edge of the storm clouds, something flickered ahead. A light, faint and shaking. Will's boots slipped on the wet rocks as he scrambled down into a narrow cut between two ridges. And then he saw her. She was huddled beside a fallen log, ankles scraped and bleeding. Her lamp had long since gone out, the wick black and cold. She held the empty glass to her chest like it could still warm her. Her dress clung to her frame, soaked and heavy, and her skin was ghost pale, lips trembling, but she was still there, still breathing. And she was not alone. A shadow moved near her, a low, stalking shape, eyes glinting in the gloom. A wolf, thin and desperate, creeping closer. Will raised the rifle, breath held. No time to aim, just breath, instinct, trigger. The shot split the storm like a scream. The wolf yelped and vanished, swallowed by the dark. Elsie flinched at the sound, her eyes wild, unfocused, then locked on him. "Elsie!" he gasped, dropping to his knees in front of her. She stared for a heartbeat, and then burst into tears. He gathered her into his arms, wrapping his coat around her shaking body, lifting her as he had on that first day when she was just a girl and the world had crumbled around her. But this time she was not limp. She clung to him, sobbing against his chest. Her fingers knotted in his shirt. "I'm sorry," she whispered through broken breaths. "I didn't mean to scare you. I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop loving you." Will closed his eyes, holding her tighter. She went on, her voice trembling. "I know it's wrong. I know you don't feel the same. I had to say it. I had to run before I ruined everything." Will's jaw clenched, then loosened. "I'm not angry because you love me, Elsie," he said softly. "I'm angry because I do, and I've been trying so damn hard not to." She looked up, stunned. Her eyes searched his face like she was afraid to believe it. "You think I didn't notice?" he went on, voice cracking. "You think I didn't feel it too? Every time you laughed. Every time you looked at me like I was worth saving. I kept telling myself I wasn't." She reached up, her hand brushing his cheek, unsure and gentle. Will leaned into her touch, eyes closing. "You're the last beautiful thing I have left," he whispered. "And I was terrified I'd break you too." "You didn't break me," she said. "You gave me back everything." The storm passed on, trailing its fury into the distance. Rain softened to a mist, dawn stretched pale gold over the horizon. They stayed like that, curled together, quiet, no more words needed. Because what had been buried in silence had finally found its voice. The snow melted slower that year, like the land itself was reluctant to give up its silence. But when it did, spring came soft and golden, wildflowers pushing through the frost-bitten soil, creeks whispering with new life, and everything between them changed. Elsie moved into the larger cabin without a word, and Will did not question it. He simply built a shelf lower so she could reach it, added a second pillow, and taught her how to patch the broken latch on the back door. They shared meals now, sat by the fire longer, their silences no longer guarded. He showed her how to saddle a horse, how to hold her weight steady in the stirrups, how to fire a rifle without bruising her shoulder. She painted his name on the barn door in chalk, Will, and beneath it, in looping, careful letters, she wrote her own. Not Elsie Carver. Just Elsie. They had not spoken the words, but they lived them. Each gesture, each glance. Each morning he poured coffee into her cup before she asked. Each night she folded his shirts and mended the cuffs without being told. These were their love letters. And for a while, the world was just theirs. Until it came knocking. It was a late afternoon when dust rose in the distance. 3 riders. Will saw them first, recognizing the man in front as the local magistrate from the next town over. The others wore badges and distrust in their eyes. Will stepped off the porch as they reined in. "Will Carver," the older man said, voice flat. Will nodded. "What brings you out here?" The man pointed toward the cabin with a gloved hand. "Heard you got a girl living with you." Will's jaw tightened. "She got papers?" "No." One of the deputies scoffed. "Then she's nobody. Not your kin, not your wife, just a pretty orphan with no claim to land or name." Will took a step forward. "She does not need paper to prove she is real. She breathes. She learns. She bakes bread better than any woman in town, and she reads books by the firelight. That ain't the law." "No," Will said. "That's love." The magistrate narrowed his eyes. "Folks are talking. saying it don't look right. Will squared his shoulders. Then let them talk. The man nodded slowly. You keep her here. That's your business. But do not bring her into town. Do not register her at the school. You understand? Will's voice dropped low. I understand that if the law cannot see the value of a soul without papers, then maybe the law has gone blind. The men stared at him a moment longer, then turned and rode off. Elsie stood in the doorway behind him, eyes wide. He turned to her, expression softening. They wanted proof you belonged. She stepped forward, took his hand. Do I? Will's fingers wrapped around hers. You belong where you are loved, and no piece of paper will ever say it better than this. He raised their joined hands to her chest, felt the beat there, steady, sure, hers. Their spring had come, and they would not give it up. The wind was soft that afternoon, curling through the grass like a hush between heartbeats. The world was gold and warm, and Elsie sat on the porch steps with her legs tucked beneath her, writing with slow, careful strokes. She had taken to journaling again, not hidden under straw or buried beneath guilt, but open and full of light. The page before her trembled in her hands, not from fear, but from the weight of all she finally understood. If I died tomorrow, she wrote, I would still thank the cruel hand of fate that cracked my world open, because in that crack you were waiting, and somehow the wound became the only place I could feel alive. She paused, pen hovering, then smiled faintly and wrote his name beneath the sentence. Just once. Well, behind her, the cabin door creaked. Will stepped out, his boots thudding gently against the wooden floorboards. He had not meant to read over her shoulder, but he had. He stood silently behind her, long enough that she noticed. Her hand froze. He cleared his throat. You really mean that? She turned slowly, the breeze catching her loose hair. Every word. He stared at her, really stared, his face unreadable at first. Then he sat beside her, lowering himself like the weight of what he carried might snap the planks. I used to think, he said, voice quiet, that loving someone younger, someone I had raised and watched grow, made me unworthy, like it ruined the honesty of it. Elsa's throat tightened, but she said nothing. He looked out across the field. But it didn't ruin anything. It saved me. She blinked, tears beginning to form. Will looked at her then, full on. You're not the same girl I found by the canyon. You're a woman, brave, wild-hearted, and I... He hesitated, then reached out and touched her hand. I have been loving you for so long. I forgot how not to. She leaned forward, searching his face, as if making sure this was not a mercy. I do not want a father, she whispered, or a savior. I know. I want you, the way a woman chooses. Will's hand lifted to brush a stray strand of hair from her cheek. Then choose me, he said. She did not speak. She just leaned in, and he met her halfway. Their first kiss was not rushed, not born of fever or impulse. It was quiet, reverent, a closing of old wounds, a promise without ceremony. When they pulled apart, her eyes were glistening. So what happens now? She asked. Will smiled, brushing his thumb against her jaw. Now? We keep writing our story. She looked down at the open journal in her lap, then up at him. I'll need more pages, she whispered. He chuckled, pulled her close, and they sat together as the sun dipped behind the hills. And for the first time since the day he found her, neither of them looked back. The river sang softly beside their new home, winding through the valley like a thread of silver. Its voice never loud, but always present, constant, like breath. Will and Elsie had built the cabin themselves, with bare hands and borrowed time, log by log, stone by stone, on a patch of land the world had long forgotten. There was no trail leading to it, no sign to mark its presence, only a narrow path cut through tall grass, worn smooth by quiet steps and daily routine. It was not grand. The roof sloped too low in places, and the shutters creaked whenever the wind teased its way in from the hills. The floorboards complained when walked across in the middle of the night, and the fireplace smoked more than it should on damp days. But it stood, It stood warm through winter, cool through summer, and everything inside it, every blanket, every shelf, every nail, had been chosen with care, placed with purpose, and earned not by wealth, but by love. Will worked the land with the patience of someone who no longer feared silence. He raised cattle that roamed slow and gentle, hunted only what they needed, and thanked the land each time it gave them something. He carved spoons out of walnut wood, built a rocking chair for the porch, and whenever he found wildflowers blooming beside the trail, he brought them home, never saying why, never needing to. Elsie, now a young woman with strength behind her eyes, used the cabin's kitchen as a schoolroom each morning. She taught letters and numbers to orphaned children from nearby homesteads, kids no one had room for, no names carried on land deeds or in town ledgers. She shaped letters with flour on the table, let the youngest practice reading from seed catalogs, and baked bread while telling them stories, her voice soft, sure, filled with a peace she had once only dreamed of. They had no marriage license. No preacher had spoken a word over them. No church bell had rung to mark their union. But there was a stone down near the river, flat and smooth, where Will had once knelt with a chisel and careful hands. On it he carved, "Will and Elsie, we found each other when the world had nothing left." It stood there still, weather-worn but firm, and sometimes in the evenings they would sit beside it, watch the light melt into the river, say nothing, just be. On one such evening, as dusk leaned in and the sky blushed violet, a lark landed on the windowsill. It chirped once, brief and bright, as if offering its blessing, then flew off into the deepening blue. Inside, the fire whispered low in the hearth. Will rested his hand on Elsie's back as she closed a book she had been reading aloud, her voice still lingering in the air. She looked up at him, and in her smile was everything. No longer the frightened girl beside a canyon, but a woman who had sewn herself a life from the torn corners of sorrow and hope. He kissed her temple, the gesture as natural as breath. "You ever wish," he asked softly, "that we'd done things proper?" Elsie turned toward him, took his hand in both of hers, and pressed it gently against her chest. Her heart beat there, steady and real. "This is proper," she said. "No vows, no crowd. Just you and me, and a home we built from scratch." Outside, the wind moved through the tall grass like a hymn with no words, just the hush of belonging. There were no witnesses, no ceremony, only love. And for them, that had always been enough. If this story touched something quiet and true in your heart, if you felt the hush of the prairie, the ache of unspoken love, and the beauty of finding family in the wreckage of the world, then this is the kind of story we tell here. At Wild West Love Stories, we bring you tales of forbidden bonds, silent heroes, and the fierce, enduring power of love on the American frontier. Stories that don't always wear wedding rings, but always carry truth. If you believe in love that doesn't need permission, subscribe now. And remember, some hearts find home where no one else thought to look. We'll see you in the next story.